Okay, scholars, I'm actually really in between chapters at the moment. Some chapters aren't ready, for some it's too early, and I want to maintain a one video a month pace if I can, so we're going to break the rules a little bit. Normally every few chapters you would get a sub-chapter called the SUB-Plements, designed to add on to previous main chapters, respond to comments, and talk about topics not engrossing or broad enough for a main chapter. But it's been literal years since the last sub-chapter, and what would have been sub-chapter 10 is kind of ballooned a bit, so today I'm going to bring you the super sub-chapter. Is this cheating? Is this illegal? Feels illegal. What's up, scholars? Moira here, and welcome to Book of Showtime Chapter 91. As always, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to leave a like and share with your friends, and if you have a topic you'd like me to cover for Book of Showtime, be sure to leave it in the comment section down below, or anywhere you can reach me on social media or the Book of Showtime Discord. You know, this actually kind of works out pretty well because I really love doing variety chapters. It gives me an opportunity to attract a lot of different people to talk about a lot of different things. And before you ask, yes, I am a little bit under the weather, but listen, Resident Evil Requiem comes out this week. I need to get this chapter out, so we're gonna have to soldier through it. Let's begin way back in chapter 2, where we discussed the wrong Game of the Year winners. When you look at the history of the Game Awards, even going back to the Spike Video Game Awards in 2003, every Game of the Year winner has something in common. They can all be enjoyed the same today. You can load up Madden 04, GTA San Andreas, Bioshock, Elder Scrolls V, Witcher 3, Sekiro. All of these games can be played and enjoyed as is, with the one exception being the 2016 winner, Overwatch. I was going to hold off on this until the anniversary chapter, but I saw a few tweets mentioning this, so I decided to open today's video with something that's been on my mind for a while. I have a physical copy of Overwatch, and if I tried to load it up, I couldn't. This is one of my biggest gripes with Overwatch 2, which they're dropping the 2 from Overwatch 2. It's so stupid. But the thing with Overwatch 2, when it first came out, is that they took away the original Overwatch, which was a paid game. I paid $60 for Overwatch, and they took it away and gave me an arguably worse version. Now, Overwatch 2 has improved a lot over the last 4 years, but the fact remains, you can't ever experience the original Overwatch. Now, before Blizzard dropped the 2, I was speculating that they would do what they did with World of Warcraft and just release a classic version of Overwatch down the line. This is something that you'll see a lot when you'll play live service games long enough. It changes so much that you feel like they replaced it with a new game instead of building on the core. I mean, take a look at Rainbow Six Siege. That was a grounded, gritty, tactical shooter, but now you have a bunch of rainbow outfits, snowball fight events, Rick and Morty crossovers, $50 skins, and battle passes, all of which, by the way, are a direct response to Fortnite's influence. By the way, if anyone plays Siege with me, I will send you provocative images. I can always choose more people to play with. Now, in real time, I still think Overwatch was the right choice because it was fresh, vibrant, it had a great community, had the best memes, the best fan art, the best R34. It was a great game and something I never experienced before. But in hindsight, I'd rather Titanfall 2 win or even Uncharted 4. Both of them are great games, but I think the delta from Titanfall 1 to 2 was much greater than the delta from Uncharted 3 to Uncharted 4. In chapter 51, we gave our games of the year for 2023. Now, in this chapter, I had Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories as my legacy game of the year, but being that at the time of recording I had never finished it, it had no score. It was the very first game I finished on the 2024 Revenge Tour, and I really had a blast playing it. My score for Vice City Stories is 7.5 out of 10. It was a very fun game. All the 3D era GTA games are really fun to play. While they showed their age in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to basic quality of life and difficulty, I always enjoyed playing them. Vice City and San Andreas are two of my all-time favorites from the PlayStation 2 era, and Vice City Stories was a very fulfilling spin-off. Sithy says, any books you've read that you actually want to talk about? Now, ignore the date on this question. I wasn't going to answer it because it felt so corny, because, you know, Book of Showtime. But, you know, the answers came to me one night. Now, I used to be an avid reader growing up. I read books of all genres constantly. I frequented Barnes & Nobles, you remember them. But as I grew older and smartphones and tablets became prominent fixtures in my life, my reading fell off, as did most of my reading before bed. Now I just look at memes and watch baseball essay videos, but I digress. Favorite books, you know, my favorite genre, if you can call it that, would be media tie-ins. I don't know what it is, but I read all the Resident Evil novelizations by S.D. Perry. They're really good, and the covers used to have insane aura. Like, look at these things, look at these right now. These all slap, but then they replaced them with renders of the characters from the games, and it's just kind of lame now. I also read the novelizations of the Resident Evil movies too. Those were solid. The God of War books were pretty good. You know, the original ones, not the reboot. The Metal Gear Solid books by Raymond Benson, which the first one was so good, I finished it in one night. I could not put it down. Out of all my favorites though, I would say the novelization of the first Resident Evil was great. That entire saga was very good. Kudos to SD Perry. Also, I know I mentioned this before, but my friend Mike Kenny, or Andreas Leacham, he wrote some Resident Evil novels. They're really good and they're available on the Nook app. As is an original novel by him, The Aurora Infection. It's a sci-fi zombie novel. Pretty good, so check him out if you can. I'll leave a link down below. I had that poor man stressed out playing Resident Evil 5. He's my favorite Resident Evil 5 partner because that was hilarious. But outside of media tie-ins, I would say the In Death series by J.D. Robb. I haven't read them in a long time, but the series is still ongoing. There's over 50 books, and it started way back in '95. It's older than me. I listened to the first 4 or 5 novels back in middle school with my mother, and I need to reread them. I read the first one on my recent trip to Connecticut. I had a long train ride, so I said, you know what, this is the perfect time, and it's good, you know. Some of the sexual stuff is a little graphic for the wrong reasons, and you know it is graphic if I'm saying something, but it's a solid detective novel, and you know, those are some of my favorite books. Let me know down below what books you guys are into. Also, I want to read a horror novel, so if you have any recommendations, let me know down below. I want to get through at least 10 books this year. Back in Subchapter 9, we discussed Kevin Durant in the GOAT conversation. It's been that long that we're covering subchapters. Since the release of Subchapter 9, Kevin Durant has been swept in the first round, which kind of doesn't surprise me, but with Booker and Kevin Durant, you expect the Suns to win at least one game. I'm bringing this up because this just takes Kevin Durant out of the top 10 for me. I felt he was a fringe top 10 player just on the merit of him running to Golden State. I know that's a hot take, but he really ruined the NBA for a few years because of that. Also, recently, Kevin Durant's burner account was exposed, and man, he is a massive piece of garbage. I hope he never finds happiness. In Chapter 63, we talked about games that we would remix together. 2 honorable mentions I had were Alan Wake mixed with Resident Evil, and Yakuza mixed with Streets of Rage. Now, I had come up with this concept way back in 2020, long before Alan Wake 2 was revealed, as I wanted a future installment to be more of a survival horror game as opposed to being a thriller, but then Alan Wake 2 dropped and is right hand to God, a unanimous top 5 survival horror game for me, so maybe this was just a manifest of my dreams. As for Yakuza and Streets of Rage colliding, Sega released a mini-game called Streets of Kamurocho where you can play as either Ichiban, Kiryu, or Majima on the first stage of Streets of Rage 2, and I'm bitter that this isn't a full game. It wasn't enough, so Sega, please, bless me with a full game. In Chapter 64, we talked about the best opening levels in video games. I really wanted to include Left 4 Dead 2 in that chapter. While it doesn't have one traditional campaign, instead having multiple campaigns you can play in any order, the canonical first level would be Chapter 1 of Dead Center. The level sees the survivors descend a burning hotel. This is a tense opening act as there's not a lot of strong weapons out the gate like in the first Left 4 Dead game. It's just pistols and melee weapons. Throw that in with a lot of windows you can be knocked off, a lot of ledges that you have to traverse that you could also get knocked off. It's a very tight and tense opening to an all-time great game. Back in Chapter 71, we discussed black representation in horror games. 2 franchises I didn't speak about because of time constraints and flow were Dead Space and Silent Hill. Dead Space and Silent Hill don't have any playable black characters. In fact, Silent Hill has no prominent black characters, period. There's maybe 2 or 3 at most, and none of them play a significant part in the games they appear in. This isn't a make or break thing for me, but I felt it was something to highlight. But at the time I was drafting this video, PlayStation After State of Play and Silent Hill Townfall was revealed, and it does indeed have a black lead, Simon Ordell. I hope I'm saying that right. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I was disappointed with Silent Hill F, but I'm crossing my fingers Townfall can be something great. And it releases this year, hopefully in time for the potential October chapters. It's also frustrating seeing all the discourse around the lead being a black man. Now the series is woke all of a sudden. Like, did the rampant themes commenting on womanhood in Silent Hill F or Silent Hill 3 not register to a lot of you? Like, as I've gotten older, you know, representation has mattered more and more to me, which is why I made Chapter 71. So Silent Hill Townfall is already at the top of my most anticipated list on that merit alone, just having a black lead. I hope the game is great. This was long overdue. Dead Space Ignition does have a black lead, but they share with a white lead, and that's such a weird puzzle game. It really doesn't feel like you're playing any character at all. There's not much of an immersion factor, and it's also not a good game. In Chapter 72, we did our first volume of pros and cons. I like doing those videos. I wanted to include Max Payne, the pro storytelling that transcends era. Max Payne's story wouldn't be complete without his signature narration and comic panels in place of cutscenes. I know this was done to save money, but I can't imagine the game being as good without it. It just adds to the noir presentation. I think even if the gameplay and graphics show their age to some gamers, no one can deny how engrossing the plot is. Con, Max Payne 3. While this almost seems unfair because Max Payne 3 was by Rockstar and not Remedy, this game is just a terrible end to the trilogy. I hope they retcon this after the remakes. You know, the story presentation isn't as good. Well, the story isn't that good either. I feel like they emasculated the character of Max Payne, and trading the gritty, dark, and snowy streets of New York for the sunsplash favelas of Brazil, I just did not buy into this game at all. Max Payne 3's lone saving grace was the really solid soundtrack, but this game had no charm, no aura, nothing. So last year, around the time of the anniversary of Resident Evil, I wanted to do a second mailbag chapter, but I never got enough submissions, but I will cover what I did get. Venetia says Resident Evil has experimented with several other game types, including rail shooter, light gun, RPG, and numerous attempts at competitive multiplayer experiences. What genres do you think Resident Evil could be really interesting in, and what genres should it simply stay away from? I would love to see a Resident Evil game in a similar structure to LA Noire and Phasmophobia, where there's a focus on detective work and investigation as opposed to combat. Think back to the Bedroom DLC for Resident Evil 7, where the entire level was one big puzzle and there wasn't any real combat. You know, Resident Evil always had a focus on puzzles, but was never a true puzzle game. So a spin-off where, let's say, like a BSA agent is investigating a smaller scale outbreak, or someone is selling a virus in a big city, something, you know, along those lines. The Revelations games are always experimental, so Revelations 3 being something like this would be really fun. Regarding the genres it should stay away from, honestly, just stop doing competitive multiplayer games. Umbrella Corps was a complete failure, Reverse was dead on arrival, and while Resident Evil Resistance made the most sense, it still was not a game that lasted long in terms of a healthy player base. Even when you go back to Operation Raccoon City, that game had a major multiplayer suite similar to what you would find in like a Battlefield or a Halo, but it was also terrible like the rest of the game. Resident Evil 5 and 6 also had competitive modes, but no one really talks about them or played them. Capcom has been chasing this market for years and it just hasn't worked. Resident Evil isn't a competitive game, so maybe just close up shop and stick to the things that work. The Dark Man first said, who has the better body, Claire or Jill? I mean, it's Jill. It's not even up for debate. I mean, she's got Claire beat on most physical feats in terms of strength and abilities, and she was going toe-to-toe with Nemesis in the original Resident Evil 3, and in the remake, she was able to lift that huge rail cannon, plus, you know, she's the ultimate hottie. She got the wagon in Resident Evil Rebirth. On a more serious note, Darkman says, in a fatal four-way to the death, who wins, Claire, Jill, Ada, or Sheva? Misspelled that. For starters, it's not Claire. Sorry, Claire fans. I know it seems like I'm being tough on her, but if you think a college student is going to hang with two special forces soldiers and a spy, I got the insides on an investment deal from a Nigerian friend you might be interested in hearing. And it pains me to say this, but it's not going to be Sheva either. She doesn't have the experience and the edge that separates Jill and Ada from everyone else. Now, down to a 1v1, I think where Ada has the advantage is that she has a lower moral floor, and she's not afraid to get really crafty. You know, she's not a truly evil person, but it's one of those by any means things. And, you know, if she has to get really vile to survive, she'll do it. Jill, she's always going to be a cop at the end of the day, and I think that's what will undo her. So in a four-way, I gotta say Ada Wong will find a way to get the W. I mean, you can't spell Wong without the W, so yeah. In Chapter 77, we ranked how transphobic the Resident Evil characters were. I'm very upset with myself, and nobody called me out on this. I'm very upset with myself that I didn't add Quint and Keith from Revelations 1. I was like, wait a minute, I missed them, I can't believe it. But I think that Keith would absolutely be in the open ally tier. He's a really chill, cool dude, and being a transphobe would be really not chill, cool dude of him. As for Quint, he would be in the doesn't understand but supports you tier. I think he may also be in the chaser tier. I think he'll be an ally just because of the benefits of getting girls. You know, he's not a bad guy, I don't think he's a transphobe, but he's a lonely guy, so expect to see him at a pride parade just to get some action. Venetia says, if you could have any fictional character as a co-host for the channel, who would be your top 5? I don't have 4 more for you, Venetia. I have just one, and it would be Ariam. I would love it if Ariam could be a co-host. I have a lot of fun doing that type of character work, and even though I can literally bring back Ariam anytime, she's going to be binded to October for as long as I can manage. But I do miss her. She's a blast to write for, and I love getting into character to do her VO. In Chapter 89, we did a Power Rangers team of video game characters. Originally, I wanted Manon from Street Fighter 6 to be the Pink Ranger, but the big issue here is her height. You know, you wouldn't see that many tall women running around, and the Rangers kind of have to live a double life, so this would make it too difficult because the Pink Ranger is tall, then you have a woman with a similar height walking around wearing pink. It just would not work. For the Black Ranger, I was originally going to go with Cherry Stone from Streets of Rage 4, but I pivoted to Lucio to keep the genders aligned, if that makes sense. Leon was on the short list for a while, but I feel like I already talked about Leon too much, and being that Resident Evil 6 was on the mind, I thought that Jake would make more sense for the team. So last fall, I was going to do my top 7 canceled games, but I scrapped the chapter because I didn't feel strongly about this list. The 7 games would have been Half-Life 3, Call of Duty Future Warfare, Halo Mega Bloks, Gotham by Gaslight, Rainbow Six Patriots, Perfect Dark, and Time Splitters 4. It's only really the top 3 of Patriots, Perfect Dark, and Time Splitters that really stung. You know, the others, I didn't know much about them in real time, and while they are cool games and concepts, especially Gotham by Gaslight, I wasn't mourning them. Half-Life 3 being there, you know, the jury is still kind of out on Half-Life 3 happening. They did put out Half-Life Alyx, so it's not like Valve has shelved the series. Halo Mega Bloks, I think it has a playable build out there if you can find it. I know Call of Duty Future Warfare does, and it's impressive watching Future Warfare gameplay. You can find it on YouTube, because you can see a lot of things that make it into Call of Duty Ghost and other Call of Duty games. Now, I love Rainbow Six Siege. In fact, I played it for the background for this video, but Patriots had such a great premise, and there's less and less milsim or tactical shooters on console these days, thanks Call of Duty. But man, oh man, Perfect Dark, that burns. We were on the verge of greatness. We were so close. The original Perfect Dark is one of my all-time favorite games. It's literally in my top 10, and after the garbage fire that was Zero, the series has been in purgatory outside a pair of ports. I lost my mind when the reboot was revealed at the Game Awards in 2020, but we kind of just went into radio silence, which is my biggest pet peeve with the industry. Stop revealing games too early. The only news we had to go on was who was joining, who was leaving, when might the game come out, but never anything official like a date or even some gameplay until July of last year. And it looked great. It looked like everything you would want in a futuristic spy game. I was ecstatic to see Perfect Dark reinvented like this. I really loved Splinter Cell Blacklist because of the combination of stealth and gadgetry, and I was getting those vibes from Perfect Dark, but about a year after the gameplay trailers were shown, the game was cancelled and the studio was shut down. This infuriated me. It highlights a larger issue because it's like, what is Microsoft doing? They aren't even trying to build an alternative platform to PlayStation. I have long lamented that Xbox has 0 killer apps right now. And I'm not saying Perfect Dark was going to set the world on fire, but how do you expect people to buy your consoles or at the very least subscribe to Game Pass if you don't put out any games? Make it make sense. Time Splitters, you know what's funny? Time Splitters Future Perfect is my all-time favorite game, and I made peace with Time Splitters 4 being cancelled faster than I thought. Probably because we didn't see a trailer or gameplay or screenshots. We knew it was coming, that's it. But when it was cancelled, I was hurt. But I'm at the point where I'm just accepting the fact that we may never get an official Time Splitters game. Time Splitters Rewind helps alleviate a lot of the pain. That game is awesome. I should probably play it more. The community gave me their picks for canceled games they wish they've seen, and we'll share them today. City says Scalebound by Platinum Games for Xbox One. Microsoft has no idea what they're doing on the game publishing side of the business after the Xbox 360. Xbox brand of console is my favorite over Sony's offerings, and they just fumble the ball. You might notice that I mentioned a few Xbox games today. Not surprising for a company that hasn't put out a killer app in over 13 years now. There's an argument to be made that Gears of War 3 might have been their last killer app, but I digress. But I agree 100% with City. I feel that Microsoft has no idea what they're doing outside of making good hardware. They canceled Scalebound right around the same time they put out the Xbox One X, say that 5 times fast, and they touted it as the most powerful console ever made, and that's great, that's awesome. But wouldn't putting out a game like Scalebound help in showcasing the power of said machine? Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I cared one iota about Scalebound, but even I found this extremely confusing. Zeta says Star Wars 1313. I think it would have been interesting and fun to play as a outlaw or bounty hunter character set in the underworld of Star Wars. I just remember that the only reason it got cancelled was because Disney brought Lucas. That's plausible, considering Disney is a family-friendly company and Star Wars 1313 was set to launch with an M rating, and it's ironic considering that Star Wars is pretty graphic when it comes to all the dismemberments you see, but there isn't any blood, so I guess that makes it okay. Look, I can be a nerd and say that lightsabers are so hot that they cauterize the wound immediately, but we all know that's not it. You can kind of soften the blow of 1313 getting canned with Outlaws, but I think, you know, Big Dan Gaming, he said Outlaws made him miss Starfield, which is a crazy statement, but Big Dan is awesome, he's the GOAT, so I'll take his word for it. I think this is a great game that would have sold purely on the concept alone. I mean, an M-rated Grand Theft Auto style Boba Fett game, who wouldn't want to play that? Ben says, Bully 2, that game seems to have been started and cancelled multiple times. Bully is in my top 5 games of all time, always wanted a sequel. Another one is that multiplayer Spider-Man game, The Great Wide Web, or whatever it's called. Would have been fun to swing around New York City with friends. Lastly, I don't know if it counts, but Friday the 13th short came out, but I think you already know my feelings about it. That last one gives me an idea. Would you guys like to see a chapter on games that got shut down? Let me know. But it does hurt to see a lot of games that are really fun and get sunsetted. You know, F13, it had its flaws, and it wouldn't get any updates, but at least the fans kept it alive through mods and just a solid community. I'm still upset X Defiant is going too. Like, that was a really fun game, and Rogue Company is on life support, like I mentioned last chapter. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a video on this. As for Bully 2 and Spider-Man, you know, I spoke about Bully in the best one and done games chapter, and I just can't help but feel that if Rockstar wanted to make another Bully game, it would have happened by now. And even if they wanted to, that is such a risky game to release in this day and age. Rockstar either plays it safe and the fans of the original don't respect them for it, or you go all in and you risk the ire of the press and social media. Rockstar isn't a stranger to being taken to court, and with more focus on preventing bullying in schools than ever, a game like Bully 2, it just might not fly in 2026. Spider-Man, on the other hand, I don't know why this game was scrapped. Like, I agree with Ben, it would have been amazing to swing around New York City with friends. I mean, they give Concord all that time and money just to shutter it after, what, 4 days? 5? I think they clipped this game. This probably isn't true, but I speculate they clipped Spider-Man Online because of all the condensed exposition they would have to do introducing all the other spiders to the universe. Let's be real here, though. Everyone knows how a spider person's story goes. They're a nerd, they get some trauma, they get some powers, easy. Anybody can write Spider-Man. They make another damn Horizon game that's multiplayer, but they think, come on, a multiplayer Spider-Man game by Insomnia, that could make $1 billion like its first weekend. Like, come on, that's a money printer. In late November, I wanted to make a chapter on games I think should be directed by Joseph Fares. You know Joseph Fares, the eccentric game director known for his Game Awards outburst years ago. That's so legendary. He has helmed a lot of games with a deep focus on co-op, putting out Game of the Year winners like It Takes Two, Split Fiction, and A Way Out. All well-received games. I think his mind would help out well in crafting an experience for these two IPs, the first of which being Army of Two. This is the more plausible concept. Army of Two is owned by EA, and Joseph Fares' company Hazelight Studios has its games published by EA. The Army of Two games, they didn't set the world on fire, but they were perfect for the rise of online gaming. They were very of their time. I played the demos a lot with my friends growing up, but I never finished any of the 3 main titles, and that's a bit of a tall task now, being that the games aren't readily available on modern consoles and they don't emulate well. The first Army of Two is backwards compatible on Xbox, but the servers are shut down, so it's almost redundant. Army of Two should be a deep cooperative dynamic, with the bond between the mercenaries driving the narrative while the distinct skill sets influence the gameplay. All the little quirks that go into a mercenaries bromance, I think Fares will find them. The next and last is Saw. Now, I played Saw, the video game, last year, and it's pretty bad. I could best describe it as a poor man's Condemned, which Condemned is like a poor man's game to begin with, so imagine how jank and nasty Saw was. Now, the one thing Saw the video game did right was capture the essence and feel of a Saw movie. The traps, the presentation, the lore, the level design, they were done with tremendous respect for the source material. It's just that the gameplay was abysmal. But I think we can do a little bit better. I think Joseph Fares can do a little bit better. Saw 2, Saw 5, and Jigsaw all see groups of survivors trying to survive a game and being forced to work together. This would be a really interesting social game with various traps and locations designed based on the scale of your party, so whether you play with 2 people, 4 people, 5, it can be something unique every time. Now, let's shift on to reviewing some community comments on previous chapters. In Chapter 75, we talked about Callisto Protocol being an unworthy successor to the Dead Space series. Noah V1479 says, I think the main reason so many people were disappointed was that they wanted Dead Space, not a spiritual successor, just Dead Space, and that influenced their expectations. I went into Callisto with no expectations except sci-fi horror with Josh Duhamel, I hope I'm saying that right, and I was happy with it. I agree, I think a bulk of the players wanting more Dead Space got burned here, and you can't even argue that we shouldn't have felt this way because there's so much DNA of Dead Space in Callisto Protocol, and with there not being a new Dead Space experience for the last 2 generations, fans were rightfully hungry. Sadly, Callisto Protocol was empty calories. I actually have a friend. She played Callisto Protocol around the same time that I did, and she has never played a Dead Space game, so she enjoyed Callisto Protocol, but me, I didn't. I'm a huge fan of the Dead Space games. They are great, but like I said, Callisto Protocol was just not it. In chapter 79, I'm laughing already thinking about it. In chapter 79, we discussed the character who wouldn't stop 9/11. That was an insane video, and I'm gonna do it again. Cynthia says, actually a good video, which I don't know what he means by that. Do you mean like my videos are usually bad? I mean, I had a feeling everybody was playing nice, so I wouldn't relapse. But he says, actually a good video. Some of the people in the Make It Worse list I actually wasn't expecting, like Titus. But Yuna could stop it, I believe. I don't think Yuna would have stopped it. Maybe limited the damage, but she's a little too soft, in my opinion. Maybe she can safely land one plane, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that. She'd fall between limiting the damage and making it worse. It's a coin flip. On that same video, Ben says Link could stop it. He could build his own plane. Boom, counterterrorism. However, he might oversleep and miss it. He does that a lot. I don't think Tears Link could stop 9/11. He could limit the damage for sure, but to be honest, I could actually do an entire video on which Link could influence 9/11 in which way. This is such a horrible sentence. Like, Ocarina of Time Link could absolutely stop it by going back in time and just catching the terrorist before it happens. Wind Waker Link, he can make a nasty storm or dangerous winds force the planes to never take off, so it's very interesting to think about. In chapter 90, we went over our games of the year, and Vinicia had a lot to say about Claire 33. I won't read it all, I'll leave it on screen for the duration of the section. Now, I know I ripped on Claire 33, but look, I had to. It's the French. We can't give them an inch. In fact, Claire 33 might be a GIGN funded PSYOP designed to endear Western minds to the French. So you can play the game, you enjoy the game, but be mindful of the next time you think of Paris smoking cafes or have a taste for baguettes for no reason. Y'all might say I'm out of line, but I have your best interest at heart. Just kidding. What's weird about this is that I actually had Claire 33 on my Xbox for a long time. I had plans to play it because of all the excitement around it. But what's funny, and look, I acknowledge this is weird, all of the award winning turned me off because now my expectations are really, really high at the moment. And anything short of a game that eclipses most of what I played this decade would be a disappointment. So I kind of have to put it on the back burner for a bit while we're moving away from the Game Awards. Also, it's still not a genre I'm a fan of. I don't like turn-based games. I tolerate the Like a Dragon games because of the movement and job systems, plus I brought into that world and that canon already. But outside of those two games, I almost never finish turn-based games. As much fun as they all look, I want to try Persona, I want to try Metaphor, I want to try Darkest Dungeons, XCOM, most of the Warhammers, but I always flame out after a few hours. So when the time is right, I will approach Claire 33 with an open mind. For journalism. You guys gave me a lot of Halloween prompts that I didn't get to. I told you this chapter was going to be loaded, and I said I'd get to them, so here's a few today, beginning with some Halloween pros and cons. Ben says Halloween the franchise. Pro. The slasher flick. Now, horror tends to age poorly in most mediums, but I think that Halloween, despite being almost 50 years old, it just completely transcends its era. The shots, the visuals, the music, the characters. This is a special film, really special, and even if Halloween doesn't blow you away, it's really fun to watch and experience what horror was like in a different time. Cons? Low kill count. Remember how I said horror ages poorly? A slasher flick with only 3 kills would not work today. In fact, they highlight this in Halloween 2018 when one of the characters laments how 3 deaths really isn't a lot. This con is a bit of a nitpick, I will admit, as horror at that time leaned a little more into the suspense and mystery aspects. It was an era where violence in a movie, a lot of violence in a movie, was a major turnoff. And now we have John Wick walking down half of New York City in trailers alone. In fact, in Halloween 2018, Michael Myers, when he gets to Haddonfield, kills like a dozen people in like 3 minutes. So horror and society's views on violence in media has changed. Entity says romance in horror. Pro, relaxes the viewer. Now hear me out. All the scares and tensions on a horror movie, it's nice to feel a different kind of tension, you feel me? Plus, relaxing the viewer a little bit just sets them up to be scared again. So all in all, coitus is pretty effective in horror. Also, this is kind of weird, but playing endurance games like Killing Floor 2 or Zombies and Black Ops Cold War gives me total wood. I don't know what it is. I'm never more horny than when I'm playing a game where I'm fighting zombies for like hours. And before anyone says it, I'm not into dead chicks. Dead on the inside, yes. Creepy women, absolutely. But post-mortem punani, no. I do not need maggots sipping on my pre-cum. That was a horrible and crass statement, but I have to get my point across. Con, not enough big women. Now, this could be wrong, and I'm not going to look it up either because it's Ramadan. I'm trying to fast from you know, looking up stuff like that. But I just don't see a lot of high BMI baddies getting back shots in horror. Spoilers, but in Sinners you do see a thick chick getting it, but you know, that's all that comes to mind. I like all types of women, alright? I like all types of women, but Hollywood, they always go back to the well with these skin and bones, kales eating chicks, you know? I don't buy sham, you know, my crush is a tiny thing, but I want to see a big 20-piece Kentucky Fried Chicken eating woman getting bent over. I want the lead actor gripping them love handles. Why I think Arden was all over my stretch marks when she was here. It's getting a little steamy in here. Before we get to the end, I want to talk about something serious, and being that it's Black History Month, I feel that there's no better time to address this. If you watched a few of my Book of Showtime radio episodes, you might have heard me talk about this, and it is the state of black wrestling and why I think black wrestlers have historically had to fight uphill. One reason is exclusive to WWE, and one is more the industry as a whole. For WWE, the reasons black wrestlers don't really get their due is because of the Samoans. The Samoans in WWE, namely Roman Reigns, the Usos, Jacob Fatu, they have essentially been cosplaying as black men for the last few years. They dress black, they talk black, they act black, and to a lot of people watching, they're going to be viewed as black men despite their Samoan heritage being important to their storyline. When Jimmy and Jey Uso first came up in WWE, they were very Samoan. They did the haka, they had the outfits that reflected their Samoan predecessors, they painted their faces, you know, they were Samoan. But around 2017, they just dropped it and became guys from the hood. It was actually a big deal on Twitter last year when Jacob Fatu released a rap song with his father in which he uses the N-word, and it was a big topic of debate on if Samoans can say it. And while I really don't feel as strong against that, that's kind of served to further my point. The N-word, the street variant, it should really only be used by black people, but every Spanish person I know uses it, and even a Canadian or two that might be watching, and that's just how it's always been for black people. You know, anything that is our culture is co-opted by someone else, and we just haven't been able to police it. But I'm getting a little bit off track. This is actually a unique issue to the men in WWE because the black women have been booked just fine. Jade Cargill is currently in the midst of a long, if not boring, title reign. Bianca Belair is probably in the top 10 conversation for the women. Naomi, before her pregnancy, thanks Big Jim, was about to have a generational run. And before she left, Sasha Banks was a huge star too, being in the main event of WrestleMania. There aren't many Samoan women in WWE, it was just Tamina and now Nia Jax, but they aren't treated any better than anyone else. In fact, Nia got released for a while, and Tamina was really more famous for being AJ Lee's bodyguard. The second reason is that wrestling being scripted means you choose who wins and loses, and that has historically made wrestling a white man's league. The second reason is that wrestling being scripted means you choose who wins and loses, and that has historically made wrestling a white man's league. If you look at all the major sports in North America, all the all-time greats are predominantly black. NFL and hockey, not so much. With the NFL, you know, the quarterback position is historically white. But when you look at the skill positions like wide receiver, running back, and a lot of the defensive positions, again, all the best are black. And you know there's probably hundreds, if not thousands of instances in wrestling history where a white man refused to let a black man go over. I mean, I hate to keep going back to the well with WWE, but can you tell me what Shelton Benjamin didn't have for him to be world champion? How about MVP? And right now, Montez Ford is like awesome. Why is he not world champion material? Even when black wrestlers do prosper in that company, it was only the world heavyweight champion, which felt like the secondary world title. It took until 2019 for Kofi Kingston to finally break through, and I know some of you will argue and say that The Rock was WWE champion, but if The Rock was all black and not half Samoan, he would never have been the star that he was. I was skeptical about even addressing this on YouTube because wrestling fans are awful, and I don't mind having a passionate debate as long as everyone is respectful, but you can't trust them. But like I said, it's Black History Month, and I wanted to have at least some type of topic. I know it's a bit of a somber topic, but it's something that was on my mind and I wanted to say it. Alright, scholars, we're almost at the end. We're going to conclude this chapter with an update on the future of Book of Showtime. Don't worry, it's nothing major, but I just want to be transparent over this catchy beat. I'm going to be honest, I have no real outline for the future of Book of Showtime. I always felt that I would get to chapter 100 before I entertained stopping, but the drive right now to work on Book of Showtime is minimal at best. Whenever I take some kind of break, I just feel a little bit better with my mental health. And I don't want to turn on this channel, I don't want to hate this channel, but it is starting to feel like a job, and I already have a job that could be physically draining, so to come home or wake up on my off days and have to do something that feels like a job when I don't even get paid, it just starts to weigh on you. I used to be able to crunch chapters out in around 4 hours max, but now it takes weeks. It was a miracle I did what I did for October, but that was a depleting month behind the scenes. My biggest issue in the last year is finalizing scripts and chapter concepts. I have a lot of points covered, but nothing will be fleshed out, nothing will flow well, so there's a lot of chapters that will just sit untouched in my notes because I just can't put it all together. I got about 4 or 5 videos that I would love to do, but they just kind of, it's like writer's block. I do not feel like Alan Wake in the Dark Place anymore. Like I mentioned in the open, I want to put out a chapter a month, and it's very doable, but sometimes it's like, I guess I'll work on Book of Showtime today, and I'll just end up doing the bare minimum before I say, alright, that's enough, time to game or bedrock. Doing voiceover is the worst. It will take a really long time to edit VO these days. Even for like a 15-minute raw file, in this one that I'm recording right now is going to stretch well over an hour. It's just so boring. Once I get into the later stages, once the VO's done and I get into the putting like the pictures up and the transitions and all that, that's smooth. I can do that pretty easily, but the VO is just, it holds the entire chapter hostage. Also, my voice burns out a lot faster these days. I know I took a long break last year, but since I've come back, it's like my voice, I talk for 10 minutes in front of a microphone, it's shot. As for Book of Showtime radio and streams and any Discord events, I'm still working on getting a bit of a base together in the server before I even entertain such things. I had fun doing it, but because it is live, it is dependent on people being present, and a few times I try to stream and no one shows up, it still kind of haunts me a bit. So Book of Showtime radio and any live streams or Discord events, they're on ice as I slowly add to the Book of Showtime community. Elden Ring probably won't be streamed. I may record it for the channel now that I got it on PC. Thanks, Ruby. And seamless co-op is a thing, you know, I can now play with my friends. That will make playing Elden Ring a lot easier and more engaging. I'm not a fan of the Souls games, but I want to say that I at least beat one. I love Book of Showtime, I really do. It's fun, and I love engaging with people on the topics we cover. I don't want to quit before I plan to and just leave it unfinished, but that is a real possibility. It's not a real one today, it's not a real one tomorrow or next month, but who knows what will happen if I wake up in June and say, you know what, I'm done. That's very plausible, but I'm going to do my best and soldier on to 100 chapters, inshallah. Plus, I miss Ariam. I want to see her again before this is all over. She would kill me if I left without saying goodbye. Alright, scholars, thank you so much for sticking out this long chapter. Inshallah, I will see you in the next one.